Hey, Bram, thanks for your time and welcome to the podcast.
Hi. Nice to meet you, and my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate you taking out time on Sunday for me. The first question I'd like to ask you is understanding when you got into marketing. Did you study it formally? When did you decide that it's going to be your career path?
The very candid answer to that is it just gives you a sense of how old I am. In the days when I was studying, pretty much the options available, credible career, where either you had to take up medicine or be an engineer, or what was just coming up in some sense was this whole idea of being an MBA, typically in finance or marketing, right? There was very little else, even from an MBA perspective. Very early on, I realized I was not cut out for math. I wasn't very good at it. And I definitely wasn't cut out to be a doctor because I pretty much used to get nauseous at the sight of blood. So I think between the two, I decided, by exception more than anything else, marketing is probably most suitable. But jokes aside, I think if you look at what you inherently tend to do, which is to look at what your strengths are, your relative strengths are versus your relative weaknesses. I figured I was pretty good at communication vis-a-vis the weaknesses that I spoke of earlier. So I think the natural gravity then was to look at industries or professions where communication itself was at the core, and obviously then marketing and advertising.
Understood. I want to follow up here. I speak to a bunch of my friends, and I've also asked this question to the guests before. Many people want to choose what they want to do. A lot of people say you should do something you're passionate about, but a lot of people don't know what they're passionate about, at the earlier stages. So, how do you figure that out? I've heard maybe it's an industry you like, maybe it's a skill you like. So, what's your advice to people who still don't entirely know what they love?
So I think it's a combination of factors. I don't think it's not like some divine providence decides what you're going to be. Or you're right. I think at the stage that we choose our professions, very often we're not really sure about what we want to be in the long run. Some of it, therefore, is hit and miss, and you're lucky or you're unlucky with your first few jobs. You either figure out it's the right thing for you or the wrong thing for you, and then decide what you want to do next. I think in my case, it was a combination of it, combination of both, because I was in the final trimester of my MBA and I had a couple of offers from one leading hospitality brand and electronics company that was into making IT peripherals, whatever. I don't want to mention the names of companies for obvious reasons. But anyway, long story short, while I was considering those two, and I was down in Chennai, which is my hometown, for a break before the final exams of the trimester. We were doing a project, and I got a call from a friend who was in an ad agency, local ad agency in Chennai. And he said, "Hey, we're looking for an account executive." And I was at the time literally on the way to watch a movie. So I was the most casually dressed you can imagine in a Chennai summer. And this friend of mine said, "Hey, it's okay. It's an ad agency. You don't really have to dress up. Just pop by, come a little early, pop by, do the interview, and go." And that's really how I walked into Goldwire, which was then Chennai's largest independent ad agency, handling MRF among other clients. And I just walked in, and I think the sort of very interesting, I can't even call it an interview, conversation that I had with my friend and then the boss, Aubrey, who is no more, but has been one of the most influential people in molding me as a professional. Aubrey was excellent as one of the brightest creative minds of the time. So it was such a radical interview. It lasted all of 10 minutes, but he left such a big impression. And he, for whatever strange reason, liked me as well. So he gave me an offer on the table. So I think that's, maybe you can call it providence. Maybe you can call it the impression he made. Maybe that's equally big factor. But yeah, I ended up spending 5 years with Goldwire and pretty much becoming the ad agency person that I became.
Incredible. I think, being curious, taking opportunities, and just trying sometimes may just open up so many doors. In today's time, though, do you think these things happen? Because, as you mentioned, it was new. But today, a year on year MBA grads coming out, especially focused on marketing, are so many. Do you think that I may, let's say, be keen in marketing? I've spent 7 years, let's say, in commerce or operations. I want to hop into that industry or that function. Do you think I may just get an opportunity because somebody may like me as a person? or is it difficult now for that to happen and you need to have formal education for you to be taken seriously?
I think it depends on the industry and the nature of your education. Obviously, if you're a highly qualified IT professional or doctor or something like that, it's obviously going to be much more difficult for you to put aside what you invested time, effort, and money to build, and or the highly specialized skill sets you've developed, right? But I think to that extent, most marketers typically generalists in the sense that the principles of economics and the principles of marketing are largely fundamental, right? Based on fundamental human nature, fundamental understanding of wants and needs, demand and supply, and stuff like that. So I think in that, it's a lot more flexible. Even finance to a large extent is a lot more narrow casted in that sense, and then say, okay, I'm willing to take a gamble. So I think in marketing and to my specific example, I think it was because I had really no baggage. I was straight out of business school. Therefore, it was not like I had any great skill set or experience that was putting me in a silo. And therefore, I think what Aubrey saw in me, hopefully, was the potential of somebody who could be molded to be a decent resource. So I think correlate your question at large and my specific example. I think it's the professional marketing and advertising specifically, which is a lot more open ended. So you know Piyush's background, you know a lot of these people's background. It's not like they formally had an education in advertising, right?
Right.
Pretty much learn it on the go. So in that, it's a lot more inclusive. But if you're looking for a specific mid-career change into something specific, I think it's definitely going to be hard. But that said, I really am not a believer that formal education is going to determine either your definitive success or your definitive failure. I think attitude more than aptitude is at least that's my principle.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, as somebody who's learned a lot by just doing YouTube and just by failing, I resonate with that quite a bit. I always had an assumption about marketing that it's about creative and campaigns and ads and celebrities. And then once I started up the company, I started doing some research. I came across go to market, and I'm like, wow, this is like the entire business. You have to figure out your customers, your pricing, how to get to them, tracking all of those things, etc. And realize, okay, it's a very strategic role. And you tend to see a lot of CEOs and founders, especially in the early stage, doing marketing and sales, and even eventually growing into a matured function of that itself. So fully agree here. I want to now get into another situation a lot of people are in. They've just graduated or they're trying to get their first job in marketing. They're in a crossroads between the agency side and the brand side. So I wanted to know, what's your recommendation to people today? What should they pick, or what are the pros and cons of both?
With the caveat that, a lot of water has sort of passed under the bridge from the time I took this decision. And I think to a large extent for me, it worked well because the way I saw it, or the way it panned out for me at least, was the fact that the 10 years that I spent in advertising, 5 with Goldwire, and in Goldwire itself, I had the opportunity to work on hardcore advertising. And they were one of the early pioneers in web solutions. This is Internet 1.0, the early .com sort of boom. And we were one of the first to set up a India-based sort of web solutions outsourcing thing for foreign markets. So I was, Aubrey sort of just took me out of the advertising business and said, I want you to be the COO and run it. So with no technology background whatsoever, the internet itself was relatively new. And you pretty much had to figure life out. And so we set up offices in Singapore, Frankfurt, and San Jose too. And, I had to go and pitch and sell these solutions to those people. Now, so that gave me a lot of experience, and I'm very grateful for that because it gave me a working understanding of how technology works and the basis of it. So that was very, very useful. Then the next 5 years in Ogilvy, which were absolutely transformative. It is, the dream of anyone in advertising, at least in India, to be in Ogilvy, and it's all that it's made out to be. Fantastic culture, creativity at the core, creativity rules everything. Even account management is, sort of literally taught to be creative, which so you pretty much get left brain, right brain sort of training. And of course, the kind of clients you get exposed to. Top quality clients, top quality management at the client end. So you're dealing with some of the smartest people in the business. So you pretty much have to shape up or ship out, right? So I think all that really sets you up very well to then decide where you want to go. The reason why I decided, or again, maybe the bit of providence to your earlier question, was I was actually looking at moving within Ogilvy to set up Ogilvy's second agency, which was when somebody who had left Ogilvy and joined Reliance at the time as head of brand actually reached out to me and gave me an offer to be the CMO of Reliance Mutual Fund, which was my first client side assignment,
Right.
which is an interesting story in itself because I have zero BFSI experience at the time. Didn't even know what a mutual fund was. Had never invested in a mutual fund, obviously, and pretty much had to read about it on the flight to Bombay to meet the CEO. Then I don't know, for whatever strange reason, he gave me the job, and we had a great run. But to go back to your question, I think it works well, at least worked well for me because you have exposure to multiple clients, multiple industries, multiple smart people. You see how you look at challenges, look at it all around. And because in a place like Ogilvy, which is like got a 360 approach, you've got a division for everything. So you end up pretty much thinking of it as a marketing solution rather than a advertising solution because smaller agencies are very focused on this is what we do. Everything else is out of purview, right? But in a agency like Ogilvy, which had activation, which had outdoor, which had PR, everything is an opportunity. So every client problem or challenge is an opportunity. So in that, it's a very good training ground. And I think to that extent, grateful for the fact that it set me up, and also grateful for the fact that the client opportunity came up the way it did. And again, interestingly, going back to your first question, I wasn't judged by the fact that I didn't have a financial or BFSI background to be the CMO of an asset management company, right? Without even knowing what a mutual fund was. So I think that's great, and full credit to the leaders. I don't know if they're still happy with the decision they made, but anyway, they did, and I'm grateful they uh, took the gamble.
Understood. So getting into an agency just exposes you to many industries, and I believe having that intuition generally helps earlier in your career to at least navigate either yourself or by chance as it happened with you. Coming to the BFSI conversation, right? You spent a bunch of time in BFSI then, and then you've been into travel generally and tourism. So what's your take there? A lot of people say stick to an industry, grow there, become an expert. You'll understand the industry. You can figure out everything around it. Maybe you will become a CEO one day also because of that. The other thing is, hey, try and have multiple exposure to multiple industries, even on the brand side. So, again, what's your opinion on that?
Again, it's changed over time. I think in the early days of my career, it was, see, the first two jobs I had were like 5 years, 5 years. So that by today's standards is in itself an eternity. So I think those were pretty stable. On the client side, I made some quick shifts early on, Reliance to DCB to Future Generali, and Future Generali I was there for almost 5 years, and then to Thomas Cook where I've been for 12 years. So which tends to happen, right?
But why would somebody not want to be slotted?
No, no, it's not about what the employer wants. I'm saying, see, fundamentally, you're the person who has to look at your own career and what your decisions are, right? I didn't want to be slotted at the other side. To me, it's a vicious or a virtuous cycle depending on your point of view, right? If you want more experience and you want more sectors, to work in more sectors because of the wealth of experience it brings you, you don't want to be narrow casted. The moment people see you in a particular stereotype, then the offers that come after you, or the people who reach out to you, tend to be the kind of people who are making you the same kind of offer,
Hmm.
right, or the same kind of opportunity. Not to say that every organization is not different, every culture is very different, and so on and so forth. But if you're looking for cross-sectoral experience, I think you need to be conscious not to get too slotted. It comes with its pros and cons. I would argue maybe, who knows, maybe I'd have been a CEO of a BFSI company by now.
Right.
Maybe that's the cost of it. But I think at a personal level, the kind of differences of experience that you get simply from working across sectors is mind blowing. So, yeah, that's
Got it.
just to end that thing. And maybe I should say that a company like Thomas Cook has a lot of people who've been here for like 25, 26 years, right? A, that's a sign of a great company. B, it's a sign of a great culture because and you sort of nurture leadership and growth and opportunity within the enterprise. If you stay around long enough and you're good, the chances are you might rise faster than otherwise. But
Understood. Bit on your personal aspect I wanted to cover was a lot of times people say, hey, I want to give back, but I don't have time. You still, while doing all this, are, CEO of Fairfax. How do you find time to, balance both these jobs? And if you can even share a little bit more about what you do at Fairfax, that'll be really insightful.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of the Fairfax India Charitable Foundation. This is a non-profit registered charitable trust that was set up by our biggest promoter, Fairfax Financial Holdings in Canada. Mr. Vatsa, who leads Fairfax, you may have heard of him. He was in India. He's of Indian origin, Canadian citizen, but Indian origin. So he was in India and met the Prime Minister, and he was keen to give back to India. He is very well known for his philanthropy. He wanted sort of direction about where it would have the most impact. So the Prime Minister at the time was obviously had been briefed about the background on the need for dialysis and the huge gap, especially with rural poor India not having access to dialysis. So he told Prem, "Listen, I want you to set up 1,000 dialysis machines," which is a very you know overarching statement. There was no real specific detailing except the 1,000 dialysis machines. So Prem came out of that. Of course, you don't say no to the Prime Minister. So he said yes. So he came out and spoke to my boss, who then spoke to me. And we sort of needed to figure out how to do this. And that's really how the trust came to be. I became the CEO. Personally, I got into it initially saying, okay, the job needs to be done. But I think as you get into it, as is often the case in these kind of things, you get passionate about it. You realize how big the problem is. You realize how much of a difference you can make versus not doing it, and it makes you feel good. So I think beyond a point, it's a second job. I call it my night job. So during the day, it's almost like Superman. During the or Batman better. So you're Bruce Wayne by day and Batman by night. So I'm pretty much the CEO by evening. But I'm lucky. I have a very good team, small team to back me. I have someone who comes with a lot of domain expertise in the space of nephrology and dialysis. So we managed to do quite a bit. We've set up over 1,200 machines across 27 states, all the way from the Northeast to J&K, way down in Tamil Nadu, end of Tamil Nadu. So pretty much covered the length and breadth. And 90% of all that we do is completely free of cost.
Wow.
And wherever it's not free, it's subsidized for those who can afford.
Fantastic. I think kudos to you for squeezing out time to do so much. Often people say, karna hai time nahi, and I think I'm going to just throw a profile at them next time.
On a lighter note, the one way to look at it is for all the sins you've committed, this is one way to earn some brownie points.
Well put. Another thing you mentioned before is about brands wanting to be, or you wanting to be customer centric. And customer centricity is something a lot of people talk about. It's almost like how AI is today. Everybody's like, yeah, it's important. We should do it. People say we're trying to do it, but really they're not doing much of it, seriously. And I think customer centricity is something a lot of people just say. So, what does it truly mean to be a customer centric company, and how can you have customer centricity in the way? How can your customers actually feel that, oh, you are customer centric towards me?
So there is a tendency today, and I'm very conscious of what I'm saying, because today the skew is heavily customer oriented, right? Whether it's the legal structuring, the code structuring, everything is very, very customer focused, meaning it's to protect the customer. I think that's right? Because for long, especially from an India context, a lot of abuse and misleading statements and stuff like that have happened. So a lot of what we're seeing today is with that background. But to your question, I think customer centricity is more about culture or way of thinking, typically coming down from leadership. Because just writing it down on a piece of paper and saying my mission is to be customer centric just because it sounds good, as very often I feel it's the case, is really not. It's going to be very easily found out, right? Because the first time the rubber hits the road, the difference between what you're saying and what you're doing will be apparent. So I think the key is really, at least my personal take on it, when you're providing a service, and in our case, actually, we're aggregating. Our service is an aggregation of other people's services. As a travel operator, I aggregate an airline service, a hotel service, individual sightseeing service, local transport, restaurants. There's so many services, and my actual service is in the stitching up and aggregating of a comprehensive experience. And my job is to make it seamless and all. And a lot can fail and a lot can fall because a lot of it's not in my control in the first place, right? Does a flight take off on time? What's the in-flight experience? What's the baggage experience? What's the local pickup experience? What's the traffic condition? Whatever, right? A million things can go wrong. It's a complex business in that though it seems very easy in principle. I think the key, at least my personal thing on it as head of service quality, is that you need to be balanced. Because at one end, you have to play the customer in all fairness, put yourself in the shoes of the customer, and what they're asking for or what they're claiming for or what they're complaining about it. Vis-a-vis your own need to balance the fact that you are a paid employee of a for-profit organization, right? So you can't be too generous and too, what shall I say, liberal with saying, okay, whatever the customer wants, I'll give, and at whatever cost to the organization. I think the key is really about being balanced, about getting all the facts around the problem, looking at feedback seriously, looking at ways to prevent problems, because very often the cost of preventing is far lower than the cost of addressing after the event. So yeah, and there are many times when there are ethical dilemmas, there are professional dilemmas where you have to take a call. But I tend to err on the side of fairness because I think that's the way to be. And every experience with a customer, however tough it may be, teaches you something. Teaches you what you need to watch out for. And it teaches you sometimes to add another terms and line to your terms and conditions document, whatever it is, but you learn something. And the thing with being customer centric in today's day and age is that customers' expectations are rising by the day. Patience levels are dropping, expectations are getting more global. The old standards don't apply, right?
Right.
And the new standard is being set. So this is the Amazon generation, and patience is a forgotten virtue. So in many ways, I think stepping up with the complexity of the industry that I spoke of is truly challenging. But at the same time, that's what makes it interesting, right? No two problems, no two issues are the same. Just like in marketing.
I want to follow up on that. If you look at generally the travel segment, it's been one of the first industries people have tried to put technology into it. Make My Trips an example. It's been around for a while. It's one of the first few internet companies in India, and abroad in the whole travel and stay and all that. There's Airbnb. These are fairly new companies. When I think about it, what happens often is that legacy brands who've been around way beyond that are then pressured to not just modernize. I think that's something they any which ways prioritize, but to also build a perception that, oh, this is new and cool, versus hey, these folks have been around. Do they get what today general travel portal would do? How do you build that perception and make sure that it doesn't take legacy as a old school company?
I would argue even as recently as about 15 years ago, if you were an old company, it was only a virtue, right? It was seen as tradition, and longevity was a sign of strength and robustness and here to stay and stuff like that, and trust, very important. What has changed in the last 10, 15 years is it's not necessarily a virtue, just being an old company. In fact, it can be seen as a liability because, to your point, you're not cool enough and my dad's brand or my even worse, my grandfather. So to that extent, I think the key is to really balance it, right? There is an inherent advantage with saying I've been around, I have the years of experience that I do, especially when it comes to high value, high investment, high involvement categories like foreign travel, where there are critical documents, visas, foreign exchange, regulatory issues, all those. You want to also in an industry which, besides what you said, has also been beset with a fair number of companies, especially in the Indian context, going under in a not so happy way. Cox and Kings are the case in point, right? Thomas Cook itself, Thomas Cook UK itself liquidated, right? And those were different challenges we had to face at different times to establish that we were not Cox and Kings, because a lot of people in those days used to confuse us, and that didn't have the same management of financial problems that they did or still do. Two is that we were not part of Thomas Cook UK because we were acquired by Fairfax in 2012 versus Thomas Cook UK that liquidated in 2019, though we shared the brand name. So while the disruption happened and a lot of new companies are coming in to your question, I think our challenge as marketers at Thomas Cook was to really say, how do you take the inherent strength of the trust and reputation you built? And you're a market leader in outbound, you're a market leader in inbound, you're a market leader in MICE, you're a market leader in corporate travel, corporate market leader in foreign exchange. But at the same time, you're seen as old, fuddy-duddy, traditional marketer, brick and mortar, not online. all those things, right? So what we've done since 2015 is really lay a big stress on this whole digital transformation, e-commerce, looking at everything digital first. So, from a capability and distribution point of view, we building for that generation, building on the fly, real time discovery consumption kind of services, being able to deliver it at scale and seamlessly, being able to create an omni-channel experience so you can start the conversation offline, close it online, start it online, close it offline, do a combination of both. And the reason why you need to do a combination of both is because India really is a hybrid market for a variety of reasons. One, customers themselves tend to do a lot of digital discovery, but prefer to transact high value physically to a large part. A, because of credit card limits, wanting to be sure, asking questions, filling forms, as is often the case for visas. Foreign exchange is still a quasi physical form filling kind of format, so hybrid is required. The second reason why hybrid is crucial in India is also because the market's evolving in such a rapid pace with the scale of our population, the fact that you've got such a big digital divide, you've got a what we call India and Bharat problem slash opportunity. You've got a India that's developed, young India wants everything online, would prefer not to talk to anyone even if they could. So you have to be pretty much capable there, full click, if you will. And on the other end, you've got an emerging, aspiring India first trip, still want the reassurance of people, relationships, support, documentation, hand holding, etc. Right? So you need the physical network, you need the people for that, you need to build the relationships. And somebody who starts out pure brick may eventually become hybrid, may eventually become pure click. You may even have a low value product buyer initially for a high value overseas holiday becoming pure brick. So it's a complex market. It's not like the West in many ways. So we've consciously sort of built A, digital first, B, omni-channel, and C, from a marketing standpoint, started getting a lot more visible in the digital domains. And I mean this at an overarching level. So whether it's search and discovery, simplistically being on top of a search page, social media, aggressive, quirky advertising, focused on Gen Z, pub hopping holidays, and stuff like that, right? Things Thomas Cook, even 5 years ago, probably would never be caught doing. So happy to say that just pre-pandemic, we did a survey. Our average age was in the mid 40s, average age of customer. Soon after the pandemic, we did a sort of thing in the first year after, and we are down to 35.
Wow.
Which to me is a phenomenal journey because it's much easier said than done because you're much closer to the sweet spot because I don't necessarily want to get too young because then my ticket size typically has to drop a
Right.
lot because consumption ticket sizes tend to be related to incomes and which again related to age. 35 is a good spot to be and I think that journey is a very important journey for us because it shows that we've come some way on our digital journey, relevance journey. And I think therefore puts us in a much better spot from a sustainability standpoint because otherwise the risk was that we would be the last generation's preferred brand and not this generation and the next generation's brand. So to stay relevant, I think we need to do a lot more and keep up with technology. So we are, as we speak, doing that in a very aggressive way today. Our investments relative to our top line would probably match those of the biggest OTAs you have in the market.
Fantastic. I think thanks so much for breaking this down in such detail. Anybody today who wants to work on this similar legacy to modernize problem, I think the framework you mentioned seems very relevant. I I now actually want to even pick your brains on how India does travels and experiences. You work at scale. You mentioned this India 1, 2, 3. If anybody is curious about this space and maybe wants to create something in this space, it'll be very helpful for them to know what kind of destinations, let's say Indians are really keen on. What kind of experiences are they really keen on? And what's the split really like? What states or regions are contributing maximum to travel? If you have any data on that, that'll be like incredibly insightful.
So, a couple of ways to answer this question. One, there are certain communities that are inherently inclined to travel for entertainment, right? For example, Gujaratis, they are huge travelers, right? Maharashtrians, big travelers. Bengalis, big travelers. So inherently these communities or these markets tend to be very strong from a travel standpoint. Then you have urban concentrations where, for a different set of reasons, you're seeing them become very big. Bangalore, for example, has shot through the roof as a city. A, because the city itself has grown so much in the last 50, 20 years. B, is that it's so dominated by young working professionals. And they really sort of epitomize this whole consumption class, right? Young people today, they don't save to buy a car. They would probably prefer an Ola or an Uber convenience. They don't save to buy a house. They probably inherited that already. So to them, making money is about spending it on themselves, buying stuff they want to, living in the now. Travel is a big part of that. So to that extent, the urban big cities are driving a lot of travel, but that's understandable because it tends to be the more affluent, urban, younger population that are traveling. But like I said, these communities, Gujaratis, Maharashtrians, and Bengalis, particularly, they travel for leisure. There are other big travelers like Malayalis travel a lot, but they travel very often for migration, work, stuff like that. You have a lot of migration from Punjab, so there's a lot of travel for that. Just for holidays, which is our core business, these communities tend to be very, very big on that. To your question on experiences, I think wonderful manifestation of this whole complex market called India because you have the traditional first timer who wants to go abroad for the first time, wants it all safely packaged, wants everything to be sort of stitched together, documentation done, travel in a group, Indian meals, tour manager to take care of a problem, that kind of stuff. On the other hand, you're seeing the more mature customer who's, pretty much just saying, hey, listen, I've got 10 things I want to do. You just figure out the logistics, tell me the most efficient way to get it done. You've even got now a set of customers who come to you with an AI generated itinerary. Sometimes it may make no sense, but you pretty much have to work with it because I think what they are doing increasingly is just telling you, listen, this is what I want to do. This is the kind of person I am or want to be seen as being. So therefore, these are the kind of experiences I want to have. And I think at a larger level, trend wise, I think that's something we're clearly seeing. If 10, 15 years ago, we were the authority on travel and people came to us and said, where should I go? And had a very basic conversation with you initially. Today, you're seeing customers come with a fast sense of some primary research, some basic understanding, some sense of what they want to do, maybe fed by their children, maybe fed by whatever. There's a lot of, the conversation's a lot more equal, for lack of a better word. So it pushes up the ante because it makes us no longer the authority, but more equal partners. So therefore, to your earlier question, also the need for technology to be able to say, how do I quickly, real time, seamlessly build on what the customer seems to want and or their constraints or challenges, budget, timing, issues like that, and provide the optimum solution quickly because this is the Amazon generation.
Incredible. So, are you saying that bespoke custom experiences is faster growing or a bigger category than packages where you decide, ki, hey, I don't know, let's say, like you said, the India tour where maybe their first trip, they don't know much. Would they be a bigger audience which is going into these packs, or is it the India one which wants to do, hey, this is exactly my bespoke itinerary based on whatever I've learned and researched?
So there are two parts to this. One is from people often ask, is it the tier one cities that contribute the most business versus the smaller towns? My answer to that is big cities tend to still dominate, but the rate at which the tier two and tier three cities are growing, obviously on lower basis, is massive. So you have to look at these differently. Big cities are mature, they are already big contributors to the business and will continue to be logically because our offices and internet access, penetration, all that tends more mature customers tend to be in those markets. Also, brand awareness, etc., lot better in the. But that said, the smaller towns are being driven by aspiration. There's a lot more money going into those towns. The next generation, smaller town resident is as ambitious, as keen to be seen as cool. Social media has leveled a lot of that, so they want to be seen and want to do the things that typically big city people did. So that's driving that. On the bespoke, which we call FIT, versus group, which is what we call GIT, we are seeing an interesting sort of set of trends there. The group travel is actually very complex to do. There are very few credible players left in the Indian context that actually do it. And in most large developing nations, and China is a close parallel, you will see a large part of the travel volumes being driven by group travel, right? For a variety of reasons. One, English is not a natural language for most Indians. They don't want to take a risk. There are visa related issues. There's a certain comfort with traveling with your own people, the security of a tour manager, backup, stuff like that. Also keep in mind that a lot of India is pure vegetarian, right? So when you travel outside this country, you never know if you're going to get pure vegetarian food, for sure, right? If you're traveling in Europe, typically you not just want pure vegetarian food, you want hot food. And in a lot of Europe, hot food's not a thing, right? It's mostly cold or room temperature food. Those are things that will drive, I think, characteristically large population, language challenge, complexity challenge to us. And I think, therefore, trusted brands like Thomas Cook, which have done this for literally a century plus, really have a huge moat, if you will, because it's not easy to have contracting ability to have bulk tickets, bulk logistics, bulk hotel bookings, all that to scale, right, and get cost advantage as well for the customer as well. So that's a very competitive advantage and is a crucial part of our business. But that said, similar to the smaller towns growing at a larger clip on a smaller base, you are seeing bespoke or individual travel itineraries customized, growing very fast. Because I think, and I suspect, a large part of it is being driven by the younger population within our customer base, who are inherently going to look at when it's convenient to travel, not when you have seat blocks or hotel blocks and departure dates. It's about availability of leave. It's about most convenient for me. It's about already knowing where I want to go. It's about picking up from friends, social media references, a fair degree of inspiration or direction already in place. So it is therefore coming from, I have a fair sense of what I want to do. I already have a fair sense of the kind of experiences I want. Can you make this happen for me? So yeah, we're seeing both, and I think both in a market like India where the headroom is so big, we're effectively still talking about all organized travel together, sub 10% of the market.
Wow.
So if you think about the headroom for this category, it's massive, right? As the fastest growing major economy in the world, the fastest growing digital economy in the world, the youngest demography in the world. By all things being equal, logically, the headroom is massive. As more and more people get into the consumption category, which is where they then will start looking at options like us for travel, I think the opportunity is massive. So people will go through their own journeys. People will have their own particular needs and wants. I know very mature travelers who still prefer to do a group tour. In fact, they travel as a group themselves. So they tend to get five, six families that are all friends or family together and book on the same departure. So they get the advantages of everything being done conveniently, paperwork, thing they don't have to worry about planning, logistics, etc. And they have their own fun because they are a group within the group, and they'll make new friends as well. Yeah, so it's a very interesting.
Fascinating. I think your insights are like really engrossing. I mean, I'm not wanting myself to ask a lot of sub questions, so I'm going to pause there and go to the next one. You mentioned about about a lot of young people coming up with their itineraries, and I think a big reason that also is happening because of this influence of influencing marketers, so much content around, and this made me wonder how does this actually happen? Like, if I open my reel, there's so much content on Baku suddenly, which is coming, and Azerbaijan, and Armenia, Georgia has been coming. Year and a half ago or two, this Yas island by Saudi Arabia was constantly being pushed, and there was so many more Middle Eastern locations coming down. I also happen to work in the travel space with some of our clients, and I know to and fro routes and destinations are very important. Market is a very important marketing strategy to make somebody feel like, oh wow, cool. Let me have some purchase. Like, let me go and purchase this route and go there. So how does a company in their travel industry decide what's the next category, route, destination I need to double down on? Is it that you decide, hey, I want to push this particular destination? Is it that a country maybe gives incentives to bring people there, or is it generally, organically people are going today, making content, finding these hidden gems and influencing people, and then you study the market trends of the user, and then you decide that. So I just was very curious, who decides where somebody travels in today's world?
I think the honest answer is it's actually a combination of all of it. So let's start with the fundamental. There is no point putting time, effort, and money into promoting a destination that does not have convenient access, that does not have a reasonably efficient, scalable visa process, and is reasonably priced vis-a-vis value being offered, because it fundamentally is a question of creating demand when you can't supply, right? It's pointless, right? It's wasted time, effort, and money. Very often you will find that a lot of the emerging destinations that you talked about, Vietnam is the case in point, which over the last few years has become very popular as well in Asia. It's really been on the back of a massive growth in connectivity, right? Multiple direct flights from multiple cities in India flying directly into Vietnam. Very, very affordable. So you've got full service at one end for those who want to pay a little bit more for a good product. You've got really low cost carriers flying into Vietnam as well. So for the low end of the market, budget travelers, visas typically are getting easier for a lot of short haul destinations. A lot of them are offering them either visa free or visa on arrival, or a very simple online visa process, right? Thailand, recently announced for 2 months, up to 2 months, Indians can travel, visa free. So Malaysia, visa on arrival, kind of thing. So a lot of these countries really have grown because they've made access easy. There are flights available, they are competitively priced, and their visas are not problem. So deciding to travel and traveling become much easier. Now it gets a lot more complex when you're talking about longer haul, more expensive destinations, typically the Schengen, US, Australia, etc., where visas are a challenge, costs are high, booking windows therefore have to be a lot longer. So there, it's a lot of aspiration playing in. It's about I want to go to Europe, I want to go to the UK, I want to go to the US, and so on and so forth, right? It's about dreams, it's about aspirations, it's about ambition, and so on. It's also, to your point, some of the newer destinations also being driven by marketing itself, which is the tourism board of that country or the government of that country saying, hey, listen, I want to drive tourism, it's a key agenda. India is a big emerging outbound market. I need to partner with people like Thomas Cook and all that to start driving. Because again, just telling people to go to Yas Island is one thing, but linking it up with something you can action on, book on is different. So you need to have come to Yas Island, film star promoting it to click here to book, sort of demand supply.
Right.
And that's really why we partner with tourism boards like that to create that sort of ambition and trial. And of course, train our sellers to sell it. It's also inherently incumbent on us, I would argue, as leaders, constantly come up with new inspiration to travel, right? Because let's say you're somebody who's traveled to 40 countries, you've done all the most obvious ones. Now I have to start telling you there are a lot more places you can go to, right? You've been to Japan. Can I tell you Korea is very different? It's close, but very different. And it is true, it's very different. So I'd start maybe pitching you in Korea and so on and so forth. You've been to all the big top places in Europe. Let me start talking to you about Portugal, which you probably haven't been to.
Right.
As beautiful as Greece, but very few people have been. And I think to the last part of your thing, it's also about keeping up with trend. You're seeing interest, you're seeing social media interest, you're seeing some growth in some. It may even come from today, and I'm being very honest, an OTT serial being shot somewhere, right? And now suddenly everybody's like, where is the shot? And then people are saying it's shot here, and then there's interest in that. It may be topical, it may be a trend, it may die in like a month, or it may become a big thing, right? You pretty much have to constantly balance these things. But yeah, marketable, scalable destinations will always remain. The inspiration, aspiration, Europe, US, Australia, Japan kind of destinations always remain. Look at Japan. It was considered expensive and niche 5 years ago, right? Today it is like one of the hottest selling destinations.
Awesome. I think it's pretty complex integrated strategy to decide that particular thing. And I'm glad it's that. I think everybody gets the best of it. At the end of the customers the happiest. I'm towards the last 1-2 questions now. One thing I'm always very curious about is understanding content production from the lens of marketing leaders like you. It's obviously something we do, and that's why I'm always curious. When do you decide what to outsource? What do you do it in house? And do you have any recommendation or any opinion on doing content production well?
Actually, we've been through multiple journeys, and I think it's in industry specific to some extent. B, really, there isn't a pure play outsource solution that works as a marketer. Almost always there'll be some level of in-house sort of tweaking or changes and stuff like that that you'll have to do. So to my mind, what I've always found is that good to have an outside point of view, a strong creative perspective, a slightly out of the box partner that challenges you to look at things slightly differently. Because the longer you are in the business, the more like the business you start thinking, right? And that's a bit of a risk. So I think that outside perspective is good. An equal partner that sort of throws something new at you, takes a problem and looks at it differently, and so on. So I think that perspective is good from a strategic, creative approach, positioning point of view. Example. So, for example, what we started doing over the last 6 months odd is taking a slightly higher stance than just the product delivery, right? Today, for example, we said Thomas Cook have great stories to tell, right? And this is actually a one step higher on the needs chain, right? It's not about travel for travel's sake. It's about what travel does to you. It's about travel making you a more interesting person. And the proof of that is that, the most interesting person in the room is often the person with the great stories to tell, right?
Right.
Getting anecdotes and experiences. Automatically, people tend to gravitate to them at a party and so on, right? So the point is really everybody wants to be interesting. Everybody wants to be the cool person in the room. But so essentially, if you want to drive this as a leader, you want to say the most traveled person is the most interesting and manifested by the stories they tell. And with Thomas Cook, you have great travel experiences and therefore have great stories to tell. But that idea, while we wanted to take a higher end position like Nike has for performance and human ambition versus just shoes, is really about saying, how do we get this down to a campaign idea, creatives that money come from it, and so on. We work with an external partner. But a lot of what we do day to day, crossing the T's, dotting the I's, doing an email, that kind of stuff is under that broad auspice and template and positioning, but a lot of it's done with the designers we have in house and stuff. Because it simply isn't practical to expect that kind of throughput and speed and million changes and so on from an external partner. So I think the real key is to get that healthy balance of outside world, big thinking, creative partner, put in combination with nuts and bolts, roll up your sleeves, do the heavy lifting in house.
Got it. So I think from what I conclude is always, if you want special campaigns with special people to maybe change customer behavior or opinion, you get experts like agencies. But BAU work which needs speed more than anything, I think is better to do in house, from what I understand.
Yeah, I mean, that's my sense. Meaning different marketers will have different experiences. But yeah, fundamentally, I think it's not practical and fair to expect any creative partner to be able to have high level strategic thinking and the same team to be able to generate 20 creative outputs in the same day, briefed in the morning, delivered in the evening. Right? Something is going to drop.
Understood. I just want to jump on to the last question now. There are only few companies which actually have been able to have a global presence, and you folks have done that. Many companies today are aspiring to go global. Of course, me and what I do, IndieFolio, are part of that, where we want to build global, creative powerhouse. And we've tried various things, and it's not easy at all, actually, to think sitting in India you'd be able to get the market and the customers and creating content and strategies which work, especially without really having a local team. So I was very keen to ask, you have, I think, from what I remember, some 5 continents and 28 countries you service. So how is it that you are able to really build global operations, a global brand, and any advice you have for founders like me who want to set up an international practice.
I think it's been a combination of providence and opportunity and willingness, right? And I say this because we are lucky that we are promoted by Fairfax. And since 2012, when they acquired us, the majority shareholding in Thomas Cook, what they've done is given us the freedom to pursue our own dreams, right? Our own ambition. Because historically, without uh, talking badly of them, the company is liquidated now. But the British company had its own constraints. They were financially constrained. They were not big on technology. They were not big on e-commerce. And obviously, a lot of those constraints manifested on us because the parent itself was like that.
Mm.
But in Fairfax, we found a promoter that said, hey, listen, the brand's powerful, the brand's incredibly strong. Now go out and make a strong company, right? And with all credit to my chairman, Madhavan, and the leadership at the group, I think combination of looking at opportunities that came our way and a lot of acquisitions that were made with Fairfax's help and some that we did ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We acquired literally a company a year between 2014 and 2019, which took us from into hospitality with buying Sterling, with buying SOTC, with buying Sita, which made us the largest inbound player, with buying TCH in Hong Kong, and then buying the DMC companies that we did around the world.
Mm-hmm.
When Kuoni, which was historically one of Thomas Cook's competitors, also exited the B2C space, we got a opportunity to buy those companies, which we did. So that made us global, right? Again, look at the brand story itself, right? We were a licensee to the Thomas Cook brand. That company hit hard times. The brand was up for sale. We jumped up and bought the brand.
Wow.
Right? East India company, the India company has bought the British brand, right? So I think, not to give credit all round. I think strong promoter, strong vision, freedom, strong leadership within India. And I don't think to that extent any of us as leaders in India think of us as being Indian and therefore different.
Fantastic. I think well put, and this marks the end of our podcast. Thanks a lot for your time, everyone. I hope you enjoyed.
Yeah, it's wonderful, very deep questions, and I truly appreciate it because some of them made me think about my answers far deeper than I expected when I came in. So thank you for that.
Awesome. I'm glad, and for everybody who stuck along so far, thanks a lot for tuning in. We'll have another marketing leader come very soon in our next episode. So please like, share, and subscribe if you'd like to be notified.